Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Turtle Island News live with Tracey Kennedy, your hostess. We are live on Revolution Ray. Studio A today. It's funny, I was on with Mona, so I forgot where was I? And, of course, TurtleIslandNews.info and the entire Awake radio group. I have to thank everybody for tuning in today. I realize in these beautiful days, if you're having beautiful days, it's hard to be sitting inside when it's so nice out, but I love that you're here with me. A lot of information for you today. It may take some extra time. It may take 2 shows, may take 4 shows, but I want to ask you a question. Something that we've led up to. All the things we've told you about. What happens when a computer, instead of a human, makes strategic decisions in a war situation? Well, rise of the machine time, we're about to find out. Operation Jade Helm, military training exercise that we have discussed many times, taking place America's southwestern states, but it's not alone. Operation Jade Helm coming to America tomorrow, July 15th to September 15th, 2015. That's a lot of 15s, wouldn't you say? Would that be 666? We've talked about that. So what is it? Jade is a network-centric warfare system that operates on a global information grid. It gets control of everything. Tomorrow. Jade spans over the cognitive, social, physical domains of the human terrain. It is a human terrain system. Jade is AI, the likes of which we have never seen, but I've told you about for a long time. This has the ability to dissect and index human cognitive functions, the mind. On a collective scale, our subconscious mind, in the form of macro cognition metadata, are being studied actively by the supercomputer program Jade. Peculiar timing, of course, if you don't think all of these things are planned. Now, on the evening before Operation Jade Helm, tonight, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft will officially do the flyby of planet Pluto. Pluto, god of the underworld, one of, big fan. Metaphysics, of course, the underworld is an analogy for the subconscious mind, also for the mother, the womb, the waters, and is a mind that Jade will be studying. Deep dish, intimately. But she's already got you. If you're on any social media, she's got you. There's nowhere to run now. Should be noted, of course, the god Pluto, Hades, and the Lord of Death. Probably an accident, right? Jade, AI, quantum computing system, which I will go into huge data about later, but if you do go to my page, TurtleIslandNews.info, you will see some places to look. We'll probably not get to that this show. But it produces holographic battlefield simulations, has the ability to use vast amounts of data being collected on the human domain to generate human terrain systems, geographic populations centric locations to identify and eliminate targets, insurgents, rebels, or whatever it labels, that can be flagged as a target in this massive global information grid for network-centric warfare environments. J2, battlefield system, cognitive, intuitive. It can explain and examine prior executed battle plans, devise new and better strategies to increase what they call the kill chain. The second generation of Jade has the capacity for two-way communication through drones, of course, and the use of all your cell phones, through OCCOM, Occult technology, which is one of the next generation integrations to this beautiful, terrifying system. So in short, Jade Helm will not be generated by generals, military commanders. It will also not be sending its data to humans to compile, because humans have been found somewhat unreliable in reading the data. Entirely computer run and operated. This is a cognitive system, software program. I realize I'm repeating some things here, but mastering the human domain, it's actually called mastering the human terrain. Jade 50. It's it. So, the real information here, what we have been working up to, which you have been told, I'm going to put it into a bundle and take you back in time and show you where this started as well. The real stock market crash in Shanghai preceded the NYSE, the WSJ, the United Airlines disruptions, followed by Shanghai hidebound typhoon. All of these things could be performed by this system, this Jade. Again, AI, quantum computing technology, produces holographic battlefield simulations, has ability to use vast amounts of data, which it has been collecting through your social media. This is why there is a social media. By the way, they never cared about your little kitty pictures. Collected all across the human domain to generate the human terrain systems, geographic population, centric locations, identify, eliminate targets, insurgents, rebels, or whatever labels that can be flagged as targets in this global information grid for the netro-centric warfare environments. This is genetic. It knows what people of certain races will do. All of the targeting things that I have talked to you about, specifically targeted weapons, specifically targeted sound frequencies that run through your computer, that run through, and you can't turn off your computer and it's gone now. It's too late. We are Wi-Fi'd. They will know how you're reacting to this immediately. It will be known. Now, this system, no longer human driven, no longer at all. This is not, we can't even blame a crazy general anymore, any military commander. They will be told exactly what to do by a computer. Sounds scary? Oh, and by the way, Robin Sage is Jade Helm for the eastern U.S. Already running. But officially the kickoff is tomorrow. Now, let's go back in time. We will go through all of the other things about Jade, which will be fine. It's going to run whether I say it or not. Because we have to go back to the Manhattan Project. And the coming synthetic, well, if you want to say coming, it's the rewrite of nature. It is why you've been told that the pod people are bad. They show the aliens coming out of a pod. It is the seed that is bad, which you are. It's the organics. So, it's not by accident, nor is it organic, grassroots trend, that numerous films are focusing on AI, intelligence, and the transhumanist takeover. When I talk to you about She and Deus Ex Machina, all of these things, right from H.G. Wells' Tales, Genetic Chimeras, The Island of Dr. Moreau, to The Sixth Day with Schwarzenegger, to a film that I put on the page that people just kind of forgot about. We didn't hear about it. It could be hokey, but it's called Chappie. Predictive programming. Preparations have been rolled out. We already hear. Now my research has focused on Manhattan. And like the MK Ultra programs, Manhattan had a much wider application than is spoken of by many people. In fact, MK Ultra and Manhattan are related through a connection of biometrics and biowarfare. You know, as MK Ultra faded away, the program was just renamed. MK Surge transferred to Fort Detrick, which we have mentioned, and one of the U.S.'s military biological weapons focused bases. With both MK Surge and Manhattan, I find an overarching idea. The transhumanism manifesto, if you will, that has its origins actually much earlier than the alchemists of this world. This goes back to some of the first writings that we have. Kemet, so many things as a matter of fact in India, but before that all through Al-Kabulan, the mother's land, when the takeover probably first happened. Specific how to program biological and yes, non-biological units. Manhattan Project, publicly known as secret operations spanning several years, devoted to developing the atomic bomb. Yes, and no, kind of. Well, atom is complicated. We've spoken of atom. If you've listened to me before, you know how intense atom is. Atom is all of us. Yet the truth, though, is deep. It is dark, mysterious darkness. The Manhattan Project was vastly underwritten, under-examined, I think. But huge, you know, it was a program concerned with radiation, human exposure, and the grand telos, engineering resistant, synthetic hybrids, and humanoids. If you go back to some of the earliest works by, oh God, the name just slips me now. They talked about hominids and hominoids being done right after the First World War. Biological? Yes, but synthetic biology. I'll look it up and find it for you later. But anyway, the inklings we can gather about this overall long-term project, because these boys have some patience. Not just boys, girls too. It appears to be geared towards biologically engineering humans to withstand the incoming onslaught of various alterations in our biosphere. Already happened, already here, already ongoing. We are not what our grandparents were, physically, spiritually, in any way. 200 years ago, you bring a person from there alive now, there is no way, without some genetic manipulation, which can be done, that they would live or be able to breathe in one of our cities now. They wouldn't. They absolutely wouldn't. Now, in order to transition to the synthetic overlay, which will integrate smart cities, the Internet of Things, the human bioengineering, cloning, biometrics, genetic programming, environmental engineering, is now an open plan in numerous transhumanist lectures, publications. In order to reach this phase, experimentation is necessary. What better means to that end than experimenting on populations en masse? And we have already seen and discussed and analyzed the technocratic establishment, and it has no qualms about testing on you unwillingly. So convert experimentation on mass populations is not without precedent. From NK Ultra, covert spraying, the U.S. government sprayed, as we've said before, St. Louis, for example, in a massive radiation experiment. Were people warned? Well, at the time, the radiation experiment was under the guise of prepping for a Russian attack. And they have conducted so many experiments. We'll go over a couple of them, just so you won't forget. It's been known that the government sprayed harmless, they said, zinc cadmium sulfate particulates over the general population in St. Louis. This is a social experiment as well, is it not? One of the scientists who came out about this, a Professor Lisa Martino Taylor, sociologist. Remember where all the PhDs came from, and they came at one time. We've talked about this. Now anyway, she claims that a radioactive additive was also mixed to that compound, and it looks like she's right, except then she fell down an elevator shaft onto some bullets and then got ran over by a car or something similar to that. Anyway, she described a detailed endeavor, as well as photographs of the spraying, which exposed the unwilling public, predominantly low-income, guess what, minority communities, to particulates, radioactive particles. Now, they've also known for a while, and believe it or not, they're saying that the most perfectly genetic, resistant, strongest people on the earth, mixed people. So, like Puerto Ricans and Haitians and South Americans, all the people of the world that are heavily mixed now, if you want to kill massive amounts of people, you're going to test the strongest. So, in, another ass-holy event. That's who they went for. Doesn't surprise me. Now, the study was secretive for a reason, of course. They didn't have volunteers surprisingly stepping up for this. Yeah, I can't wait to breathe in some zinc, cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles. Can I please? These particles were distributed from 1953 to 1954, and if that was not enough to tamper with enough genetic material, they did it again from 63 to 65. In Corpus Christi, the chemical was dropped from airplanes over large swaths of the city. In St. Louis, the Army put chemical sprayers on buildings, schools, public housing projects, mounted them in station wagons for mobile use. Now, despite the extent of the experiment, local politicians weren't notified, but the content of testing. People of St. Louis were told that the Army was testing kittens and bunnies and happy things. Okay, not really. Testing smoke screens to protect cities from said Russian invasion, who were at that time the bad guys. Operation still ongoing, of course. Now, fairly shocking, you would think, the level of duplicity and secrecy. And clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people. Obviously, right? Now, hundreds of pages of declassified information has been made available online now. This research, the greatest concentration of spraying in St. Louis was a public housing complex, which was home to 10,000 low-income residents. Low income, still alive, most likely you've got some strong immunity. If I was diabolical, I understand the ideas. So, 70% of the residents were children under 12 who would be passing their DNA on for a very long time. Now, Professor Martino Taylor became interested in the topic after hearing independent reports of cancers, surprisingly enough, popping up amongst city residents living in those areas at that time. It's actually a massive amount. Violation of medical ethics, international codes, military zone policy at that time? Yes. And there is overwhelming evidence that shows people in St. Louis and in the city, particularly minorities, were subject to several military testing operations that was connected to a larger radiological, you know what I'm saying, weapons specifically. That's why I'm going back to Manhattan Project. But I have more links as to why. Now, the St. Louis testing was sponsored by a now defunct company called U.S. Radium. The controversial company came under fire, numerous lawsuits, after several of its workers were exposed to dangerous levels of radioactive materials in phosphorus and, phosphorescent paint. And they did end up glowing in the dark for a little while, and then, dying with their skin melting off. Now, the U.S. Radium had a reputation that they have been found legally liable for producing radioactive powdered paint that killed young women who painted watch tiles. Tested the girls first. biologically women are stronger than men. This is probably, and I'm not saying it to be mean, I love boys, men, all of you guys. Anyway, one of the compounds that was sprayed on the public was called FP2266. Interesting numbers, but I'll try not to focus on that. Now, according to the military documents, it was manufactured by U.S. radium compound, also known as radium-226, was the same one that killed and sickened many of the U.S. radium workers. The Army admitted that it might have had some knowledge or may have added a phosphorescent substance to a harmless compound. But whether or not the additive was radioactive remains classified to this day. And actually, there was almost impossible to find anything about this specific group of ridiculousness that followed the long-term health residents in the compound. But in 1972, the government destroyed all of these houses. Now, upon learning of several professors' findings, Missouri's lawmakers called the Army to detail the tests. I share and understand the renewed anxiety of members of St. Louis communities that were exposed to the spraying of chemicals as part of Army tests during the Cold War. Now, it goes on, and we've talked about these things in detail. They don't care about your rights. Say it with me. They don't care about your rights. You with me now? They don't care if you don't like the chemtrails. They don't care if you don't like the GMOs. They don't care. Are we clear on this? Although I'm all for more spraying of that naked zombie dancing cooking houseboy thing they did. Let's get some more of that. At least, if we're going to go, it's going to be fun. But this particular experiment, amongst numerous ones, of course, involving radiation, no coincidence. The 20th century appears to have been radiation century, suggesting hypothesis by research like Sophia Smallstorm to be correct. And I'll give a link to an article from her, but I think we've talked about her before. Anyway, I'll put it on the page. Anyway, Smallstorm argues that the goal of 20th century experiments were to precisely to override the existing biosphere with a new synthetic overlay, or Humanity 2.0. Humanity Plus, the new Homo evolticus. And I hate when they call us homos, don't you? Anyway, that this new being would be an androgynous, a being capable of technocratic control beneath the all-seeing eye of surveillance. Children grown in test tubes, according to Brave New World plans of Huxley, and sex would become meaningless. The offspring allowed to subsist would be genderless automatons, made for slave-like subjugation and toil. Wells described this in his Time Machine with the Morlocks and the Eloi. Now, from Bertrand Russell to Dr. Edward Teller, the plan that is blossoming now, right now, is showing itself to be a unified one. The plan that spans the last century in particular as the century of the new revolution in Russell's words, where the scientific process would reveal secrets to all the technological imperialism. Teller himself, as I've said before, was not only a key figure in the development of the hydrogen bomb and the Manhattan Project, but also the father of aerosol spraying, atmospheric geoengineering. Should I go into that a little bit more? Or are we covered enough? Okay, I'll go into it. Some scientists are calling for more study to forestall catastrophic global warming. She says to herself, because they love us and they have proven that over and over and over again. So when a report on climate change comes to the U.S. President's desk, I guess that's if nobody's under the desk. Moving on. The suggestion was not to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Rather, scientific advisors counseled intervention via technology in the climate system itself to practice what is now known widely as geoengineering. And the president was not Barack Obama, was not George Bush, was not Clinton. It was Lyndon Johnson. It was in 65. Oh yes, this generation has altered the composition of the atmosphere, global scale. Too late now. Too late. A steady increase in carbon dioxide from the burning fossil fuels, of course. President Johnson told the Congress February that year, 65, to address the problem. His science advisors suggested spreading reflective particles over 13 million square kilometers of ocean in order that they reflect 1% of the sunlight away from Mother Earth. Today, climate change accelerating, climate friggin' disruption, climate gone mad, and with almost nothing being done to curb the emissions. Some scientists have now resurrected the idea of deliberate, large-scale manipulation of the planetary domain. Is that right? Well, as the UK Royal Society puts it. After all, it's an idea nearly as old as the understanding of physics and the principles behind the climate itself. Now, a Swedish chemist, whose name I would just butcher terribly, his first name is Savant, Arrhenius. I'm sure I've talked about him before. His long, difficult to say name sounds familiar. But he thought global warming would be a boon to humanity, and therefore fossil fuel burning should be encouraged. We should burn more stuff, faster stuff, bigger stuff. After calculating by hand the likely temperature impact of continued coal burning and rising carbon dioxide concentrations in the 19th century, roughly matching the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in their computer models more than a century later. That's why 175 scientists and other interested folks, like companies looking to profit from said Ferengi geoengineering, all gathered in Islamar Conference Center near the end of March, try to repeat the success of all the molecular biologists who gathered back in 1975 to reassure a skeptic public about genetic engineering. Ultimately, the gathered would-be engineers released a statement calling for, amongst other things, further research in all the relevant disciplines to better understand and communicate whether additional strategies to moderate future climate change are or are not viable, appropriate, ethical. The list of unintended consequences to human manipulation of natural systems is frickin' long. Concrete jungles creating urban heat islands, vast oceanic dead zones resulting from fertilizer use in inland fields, forests, not really forests, but it's, are ridiculous ways of making food and killing the vast amount of populations of plants to choose one. Let's just choose one. Just choose one. You know what I mean? Pick one plant, that's all you get. Now, such as, the cane toad, as a matter of fact, but there's been all kinds of species just introduced. The cane toad was in Australia, but it's wreaking havoc on ecosystems when we just decide to do stuff like this. The idea is to mimic a volcano's cooling impact on the climate by constantly puffing sulfates into the stratosphere, or to brighten clouds via crewless ships spraying water vapor. Possible problems ranging from shutting down rainfall completely in certain regions to unilateral declarations of war for stealing somebody's water. But that would never happen, right? Now, the Royal Society noted in its 2009 report on geoengineering, the safest, most predictable method of moderating climate change is to take early and effective preemptive strikes, if you will. No geoengineering method can provide an easy or readily acceptable alternative solution to the problem of climate change, other than using technologies that aren't so stupid, which is what I would say, but I was not invited to said conferencing. Now, nevertheless, humans are already managing the climate, even with actions intended to improve the environment. Recent decision to cut sulfate pollution from cargo ships will, in effect, further warm the globe as cooling particulates are removed from the sky. Now, I realize some say it's not warming. Well, you don't live north. If you live far north, you would realize we are beyond screwed. I don't know what's more screwed. Screwder? Scrutessimo? Yeah, it's really bad. And even the stuff that we've talked about, solar radiation management, that's Stanford's word for it. Why humans might want to get smart about planetary management. Again, an old word. Geoengineering, you can hear lots about it. I've talked about it before. And our planet has a pretty good system on her own if she was not screwed with. But she has been for a long time. Thus, this is concurrent with the alchemical, atomic, and nuclear tests done by igniting bombs into the atmosphere, beginning at the Trinity site in New Mexico. The history site, A-Bomb 1, explains, from 1945 to 1963, the U.S. of A. conducted extensive campaign of atmospheric nuclear tests, grouped into roughly 20 test series. After 1963, the Limited Test Ban Treaty was signed. Testing for the U.S., Soviet Union, and Great Britain moved underground. France continued atmospheric testing till 1974. China did so until the 80s. Now this page mostly focuses on the U.S. testing because those documents are pretty easy to get. Now a researcher, Michael Hoffman, opinions on the alchemical significance of the tests at Trinity. Yeah, I'm thinking something right now. Anyway, its site and its scientific underpinnings. The real science is a bad master and a dangerous servant, and not to be worshipped is that science is not, nor has it ever been, objective. Science is fundamentally but the uses of measurement. What does not fit the yardstick, the scientist is tossed. Scientific determinism has repeatedly excluded some data from its measurement and fudged other data, such as Piltdown Man, in order to support its self-fulfilling nature of its own agenda to be Darwinism, cut, burn, poison methods of cancer treatment, for one example. This process is observed from the Renaissance, which was informed by the secret gnosis, which we have talked about, whose core dogma was momentous change in man's attitude towards nature, when nature became the enemy. The alleged perfection of the flawed creation by invention of some omnipotent human brain. Thus was the Renaissance magical tradition that gave birth to the monstrosities of the world machines, the industrial pollution, the ugliness, the modern way of death we have come to term the rat race. If you want to hear more about this, it's actually an excellent book called Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare. That little piece is from page 49. Would you guys like me to put links up to all of these things? Okay, I'll put some links up. I'm going to do it after, okay? Anyway, in regard to the esoteric significance of the site itself as a rite, to mock the Trinity. Now, I'm not saying I believe in any of this, but just in case. Just in case. So, the creation and destruction of the primordial matter, the prima materia, which I've spoken of. At the Whitehead, which means the Ancient of Days, at the White Sands, New Mexico, at the Trinity site. Trinity site itself located at the beginning of the ancient Western Road, known in Old Mexico as the Journey of Death, Jornada del Muerto. Fabled alchemical process here had at least 3 goals: to accomplish before the complete decay of matter. The total breakdown we are witnessing today was completely friggin' fulfilled. They nailed it. Creation and destruction of the primordial matter. The killing of the divine king. The bringing of the prima materia to the prima terra. The connection here to overall, what would I even call it? Stratagems, as we've spoken of before, of all the technocratic transhumanists. And the Manhattan Project can be put down. And for those skeptical of the connection here of ritual magicians and occultists to modern science, consider the person of Jack Parsons, the father of Jet Propulsion Engine, avid follower of Crowley's OTO, who made your Hollywood your Holywood. The Ouroboros, signified here, is a cycle of temporal and material existence being transcended to achieve apotheosis through techne. For this great work to be achieved, much experimentation was needed, from the human psyche to the depths of subatomic particles. And I wrote about and spoke about the splitting of an atom as a kind of ritual sacrifice. But I'm going to remind you of that again, because it needs to be said, and yes, I realize this is going to take a while. But we need to really break this down. It is not by chance these things are happening. So in our emergence, we are submerged in a sea of knowledge. Modern wonders reaching their apex in readily available stores of knowledge at anyone's fingertips right now. Now, given this seemingly magical commodity that was before unknown to vast populace, is certainly to the now dead humanity, you would think that man could jump, or at least jump at the opportunity to educate himself on any topic. Yet the reality is quite contrary. As such a notion of aspiring, latent human potential had its origin in the universalized doctrine of human reasoning, bequeathed to us once again from the Enlightenment era, so Prussian educational system that I've gone over. Now, the vast online databases that are out there seem to only be perused by a few, with the majority of humanity preferring to opt for wasted life, the meaningless, the mundane, in a strange twist that must baffle any modern progressive. Humanity has devolved with the advent of imagined tech utopia and not risen to the heights of transcendence, but it's about a couple people have, some people using it, and I think because of their scientific systems they know which ones they're studying and which of you are just playing wackadoodle from some porn, which I have nothing against. Do you think? But we have opportunities to save ourselves. I'm doing it. We could be doing better things and spending our time studying, because that's what they're doing. But Western man, in particular, trained this way. Yes, I said man. Now, of course, our men have been told that they are somehow elite and different and given a sense of illusionary supremacy. We also know that's not true. It's not because it shouldn't be true. it's because for the most part, all of these things are lies. Now, we have been firmly convinced of a dogma that humans are blank slates, as I said again, oppression, indoctrination, awaiting the right imprint, the perfected external educational stimulant, the hallowed secular social order, finally gets it just right, that the man will achieve his, rise or triumph, become the enlightened being, maybe, Promethean epoch. Now, the coming technocracy appears, the universal education, the global democratic republics, full of enlightened, informed citizens, leading the way to great ascent to godhood.
Using his burgeoning intelligence, this most successful of all mammals has exploited the environment to produce food for an ever-increasing population. Instead of controlling the environment for the benefit of the population, perhaps it's time we control the population to allow the survival of the environment.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Turtle Island News with Tracey Kennedy, live on Revolution Radio, Studio A. I see some of our girls from Will Spirit Radio, so I'm thinking probably simulcast there too. Thank you very much. Of course, TurtleIslandNews.info. And yes, I absolutely will give you links to some of the stuff I'm talking about today. And the Awake Radio Group. Now, Parsons openly combined his occult views with scientism. Open. He wasn't hiding it. So, the false faith, the new faith, in man's reason and scientific methods. I'm not saying man is not reasonable. I'm saying that we had another way to do these things. Now this is all over the world, not one people over another. Must also be accompanied, these things, with a false faith in man and his own progress. Right? It's not to say that man can't use his reason to probe the atom, control the electromagnetic spectrum. He can, he does, most likely always had, but why does he do this? To make everything, to take it away from the sacred, if you know what I mean, emptied of divinity. I guess the only logical conclusion is the destruction of what is. This is the view of man's quest to dethrone the goddess, our very earth. And it has become fatalistic and can only annihilate the prima materia. The universe is mirrored, of course, in the atom. And so the atom must be divided, because the universe must be destroyed. And this is because man follows Satan, who is the adversary that divides. Basically what it means. Satan, the thief that comes to steal, to kill, destroy, if you're a believer in the Bible, to divide and conquer, man's quest to ritually sacrifice the atom, like Abraham divided the carcasses in Genesis, is also like Phaethon. Phaethon is a moral son of Apollo, mortal, who tried to drive his chariot into the sun. It is a modern. What's a myth we should look at, anyway? In this masterpiece called Temios, Solion, which we've talked about, speaks of him, this sun, Phaethon. There have been, and will be again, many destructions of mankind rising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by agencies of fire and water. Other lesser ones, of course, with other innumerable causes. There's a story that has been preserved, that once upon a time, Phaethon, son of Helios, the sun, obviously, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was on the earth, and he was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now this has the form of myth, of course, but really signifies a declaration of the bodies moving in the heavens around the earth, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth, right, that reoccur after long intervals. So fast forward to the scandal of the SV40 vaccine, and Dr. Jonas Salk and Dr. Maurice Hillman, and we suddenly have an accident in which a strain, a simian virus, in inoculations resulted in cancer. Now, according to Edward T. Haslin, in his Dr. Mary's Monkey, the totality of the Manhattan Project was concerned with radiation, with the technological and technology of inoculation specifically, having intimate connections to the military-industrial complex. See, everything that has led up to this is a part of the same thing. And it's why the Renaissance was completely backed in this new age of modern thinking and everything scientific and nothing has spirit. Was about a couple bankers and a few Jesuit priests that rewrote and changed everything. Now when we consider the central place of all planetary bioengineering and biometrics, that is just replacing the older eugenics, right? The new plan has morphed into dysgenics operations through covert soft kill methods. The SV40 is believed by some to be not a cure, but a covert experiment into the results of inoculation technology for population in general, even when it was made. It was to see who dies from this. Now, while this may seem a little far-fetched, Dr. Jonas Salk himself wrote of the need for vast population reduction in 1972 in his book called Man Unfolding, and the ability of the establishment to accomplish these goals through technocratic means. And I do have a video that I'm going to link up. I forgot about all this stuff. Anyway, where in the CBC documentary, Dr. Hillman openly admits that SV40 infected the populace, everyone that was given to. Now, the Polio Forever blog has done extensive research on the SV40 and cancer, numerous establishment sources and papers linking again the Manhattan Project to vaccines, radiation, and cancer experimentation, and particle accelerators, believe it or not. Now, considering the SV40, citations are as follows. This period, 1951 to 1953, is awfully convenient for the AEC in the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission's 100-year surveillance recognition, and just in time for the experimental inclusion in the polio vaccine, along with the cancerous HeLa cells harvested in February 1951 at Johns Hopkins, funded through University of Minnesota lab, under the direction of Leo Schittler, I know, weird name, to become the viral seed stock for the Salk IPV and the SV40 combination, which may have been the right formula for the vaccine, announced by Jonas Salk to his supervisors in 1952. Dr. Henry Seymour Kaplan, together with Edward Jinston, invented the first medical linear accelerator in the Western Hemisphere while he worked at Stanford University, San Francisco, interestingly enough. Now, the 6 million volt machine was first used in 1955, 6 months after another model was first used in England. But all these guys know each other, right? Now, the particle accelerators were used to microwave various cells, while the results are cataloged to determine their biological warfare utility. Now, Haslam wrote, "My conclusion is that this medical Manhattan project that was on the grounds of the U.S. Public Health Service Hospital, New Orleans, again, was using a linear particle accelerator for the purpose of mutations of cancer-causing viruses, and the danger and the ethical issues involved, this is why it was so secret." There was another Covert, of course, laboratory, which was discovered by the investigative team working for Jim Garrison's investigation on the Kennedy assassination. This was another underground lab, which was reportedly using cancer-causing viruses to create cancer. And what is particularly disturbing about this laboratory is the location, which was in the hands of people who can easily be described as right-winged political extremists. It's important to remember that the majority of the doctors involved in all of these programs were committed to eugenics, more properly dysgenics, intent on the scientific fact, quote unquote, that the masses must be destroyed, stunted, retarded, re-engineered to either not exist or become once again an endogenous Morlock serf to technocrats of the future. Now, from the Victorian age era to the White House science czar, John P. Holdren, whose eco-science dictates a picture more frightening than population control, it is the endgame. It is the alchemical transformation of man into a new eon of a technoman. The belief of this cult is not science, but esoteric philosophies that man can, by technology, transcend bodily limitations and death, but only through mass sacrifice of billions on the altar of progress and the worship of death. The true plan is complete rewrite of the entire genetic makeup of our good Earth, and the eventual integration of all inanimate life into the web. This is why I have constantly written, constantly said about the internet as AI reconnaissance, with the singularity eventually given rise to a transcending of the limitations of our dimensions. Even geneticist David Suzuki has recently commented on this ultimate goal, noting that the entire planet appears to be part of a great experiment. Now from We Are One, Suzuki says, by slipping into our food without our knowledge, without any indication that there are genetically modified organisms in our food, and have been since the 50s, by the way, we are now unwittingly part of a massive experiment. The FDA has said that genetically modified organisms are not much different from regular food, so they should be treated the same way. But the problem is, genetics have followed an inheritance of genes for as long as we know. What biotechnology allows them to do is to take this organism, move it horizontally in a totally unrelated species. Now, David Suzuki doesn't normally made a carrot with an exchanging gene, but biotechnology allows us to switch genes from one to another without the regard for any biological constraint. It is very, very bad science. I assume that the principles governing the inheritance of genes vertically applies when you move genes laterally or horizontally. I don't know. There's absolutely no reason to make that conclusion, and why they are saying it is like the stupidest thing ever. So, Suzuki, again, he writes, in gearing up for the 2010 release of its super genetically modified corn, like they even called it super genetically modified, because saying that it was a little genetically modified wasn't even close to what this bad boy is. The smart stacks, agricultural, biotechnology, giant Monsanto, use as an advertising slogan that asks, wouldn't it be better? But we can do better than nature, which has taken millennia upon millennia to develop the plants that we actually can eat for food. They actually signal to us when we can eat them. We may no longer be able to see this link, but our bodies know it exists. The plant knows. The plant is inviting us to eat it because it's becoming part of our genetic makeup. We will go together into the ground, which will reproduce for further generations. This is how things are done. It's why, and another reason why they have stopped people from knowing their first language, the language of their peoples, because if we still knew those languages, we could fix this world in a minute. We would know how to speak to it. We would know the magic words and the right intonations, have the exact right frequency to counteract all of this mess. We would. But we have English, mostly spoken, 26 letters, which is built on a deck of cards, which is 52 letters, so we got half. And that's not even talking about the grand arcana, which if we looked at it rightly, purposefully, we could see how to completely heal our own bodies with that. I'll go over the tarot one day again. because it's important. But moving on. There is a reason why certain things have been removed all over the world. Because of this, they don't want us to be able to fight back. And there's very few languages that have that power anymore. Very few. Maybe some of the Sanskrit. Maybe Tamil. Maybe some of the ancient languages that are still scattered along this world. We need to find them out. We need to learn them. Get enough people speaking the ancient languages, we fix everything. But, people don't read. Well, you guys read. We got what, 10 guys? I'm telling you, 8 guys in a boat anytime. Where was I? Oh. So. Scientists don't share any consensus about issues like human-caused global warming. They don't have the same level of certainty about the effects of genetically modified organisms on environment and human health either. Now, the Manhattan Project involved several thousand participants, all compartmentalized in their knowledge of the grand plan, as is always done. Likewise, it is my idea that the present grand experiment involves all of the experimentation with the biosphere that we are witnessing today, with the goal of eradicating man as he presently exists. This is why we are seeing mainstream articles about intelligence officials concerned over our weaponized warfare. And recalling Dr. Edward Teller, we see the connection between geoengineering and Manhattan. 20th Century Wire details this recent report as follows, and it kind of cites The Independent. Now, these claims definitely provide cause for concern. How can an agency with such a shady history be let loose with such dangerous and destructive technology? Professor Alan Rodbach, senior American climate scientist, has said that he was contacted 3 years ago by 2 men claiming to be CIA. They asked if it would be possible if another country was manipulating American weather patterns, which Rodbach deduced as them actually wishing to know if it was possible for another country to figure out what was being done to them. Now, a senior American climate scientist has spoken of the fear he experienced when U.S. intelligence services asked him about the possibility of weaponizing the weather, as major report on geoengineering has been published. Now, Professor Alan Rodbach stated, I don't know, about five years ago, I think. I'll have to get the link to the original one. The 2 men claiming to be CIA called him to ask if it was possible, some hostile force, of course, and he suspected the purpose for the call was to find out if American forces could meddle with other countries' climates instead. Now, he supposed, but he's a scientist, and at least knows about the diabolical minds of these people. Now, during a debate on the use of geoengineering to combat climate change, at a meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science in San Jose, California, Professor Rodbach said he got this call. I know he keeps repeating it. Now, in the past few years, the rollout of tech and AI, fake wombs, which we've talked about what that does. A womb where a child has no combination to its mother, hearing its father's voice, hearing natural sounds around it, being inside of a tube with no heartbeat, just mechanical sounds. That child, I swear, would never be able to bond. Never. As strong as we are, no, I don't see that working. I don't see that being okay. But again, the blank slate theory, that again was why all the education systems were changed worldwide, and they had to stop all the one-room schools and people learning together for this. For this. It's about the rollout of the AI, the tech, complete takeover. It provides evidence as robots begin to replace workers, as they have for quite a while, but more so in manufacturing and service sectors. It's been glowingly predicted that we will see the AI nanotech invasion within the next 1 to 20 years. They may be that close. We may see it at the end of this year. If this AI, which I've talked to you about, this is part of the complex called the Beast, by the way. If he does what I think he does, we're going to see it much faster. Now with the nanotech re-engineering mankind into just synthetic android existence that I have been discussing, intelligence officials, for example, predict a very transhumanist future in the next few decades. And DARPA, perfecting the Matrix style, modern. Well, it's a modem, but it's different. It's where the internet's access will all link directly to your brain. You will be able to see inside your head, and later probably have girls to project out. Now, in the trailer that I played for you, a documentary called The Transcendent Man, and I will put up links, all the alchemical goals that I've talked to you about, all the recent DNA laser printers associated with Kurzweil, all demonstrate various broad spectrum programs of technocracy, that none of them were accidental, but clearly covert fronts for a deeper plan about bringing the great work of the end of man, the rise of the new man, of intergalactic synthetic Borg dystopia. Man is no island, but the new world will be one where every man is an island, of Dr. Moreau. The AI, the DVD. Now, there is so much research on this. And I'll have to put up a lecture. I'm not sure I've done it. It's called From Chemtrails to Pseudo-Life. A Sophia Smallstorm's work. This has always been the plan. Always. But the rollout of it, tomorrow. It's happening tomorrow. I would think, to be honest, that they are so much further ahead, and we've talked about this before, but this goes full spectrum, right in your face. Proof. These people who have never cared about testing you and your children, your grandchildren, since the 50s, worldwide. Before that, if you call what what they did to make people kill each other in such numbers in World War II. They had already changed us between World War I to World War II. This idea of knowledge without wisdom, though, the hard truth, and this is hard, difficult, all the Enlightenment ideas were not only wrong, but they were funded by the banking cartel for the purpose of social disorder, reorganization, the dark lords of cash, subversive secret societies, all working for a king, atop of demigods and salesmen that later became, governments. The governments aren't the higher echelon. They do what they're told, or they get changed out. It's that simple. But they knew of the stupidity of all of these notions. Even their Enlightenment idea, the tabula rasa anthology, the blank slate, nevertheless the endless dream, to have one out. Will never really go away, but we make it sound so sweet and let's be enlightened. The money powers are laughing. A deep, hearty, satanic kind of cackle as the centuries pass by. So we have a couple hundred years after 1789 and 1776. What do we see as we sit here? We see the intelligentsia operating as if physics and imperialism are exactly or are just wonderful grand narratives. Total hypocrisy, labeling all religions fiction. Well, since they wrote them, of course. But it's easy to even disprove something that you wrote. They know it's a lie. But they're using that to say all of it is a lie, and we know it's not. And of course, they're showing this book, like many of the others, are about power and satiated human fears. These intellectually dishonest liars erected their own alternate narrative that daily assaults me, which I gleefully dissent to on a daily basis, the new gospel of human ascent through science. I think here of Auguste Comte's patterned view of history, where man passes from gradual stages of brilliance, primitive, superstitious, paganism, to something rational. I don't know. The one God. To philosophy, metaphysics, to physics, to social sciences. And although it's not the truth, from the truth as regards the actual workings of science, the actual structures of a social order in history, this mythology is still sick. We cannot possibly be the demons they put us up as, or children would not be born helpless and stay helpless for years. End of argument. Predators that only want to kill. You give birth and that thing can just go out and rape and pillage or whatever it's going to do. We are not those things. We are not the things, the haters, that we've been taught. The Frankfurt School that I've told you about became the nexus the point of all this dark strategy, the work of grappling with the course of the never-ending revolution. From 1776, especially 1789 and onwards, looking into the future for social engineers to fix man through his needed destruction. I've talked about Habermas because he was a major Marxist Frankfurt School thinker who links the destruction of the old world to French and American revolutionaries, which is weird. The rest of guys like him, who worked with all the Western oligarchs and the British establishment to destroy the Western social order on every continent on this planet, exported their weaponized education systems worldwide. Significant for demonstrating that evil is not merely an organic, chaotic force that just happens. On the contrary, it is very much concentrated, organized, cunning in its tactics. Key point I'm trying to make here is that this technocratic rewriting is a strategic plan for the complete destruction that had at first been preceded by centuries of revolution that we would not stand for it. But this is Bertrand Russell. This is Aldous Huxley. What they called the final revolution, indicating by this the great revolution would be against man itself, and it would be organized, and it would be structured, and it would be full spectrum supervision, subversion, inversion, dominance. That by the time this rolled out, and it was planned, and when Lord Bertrand Russell spilled the beans in 1951, called a book called The Impact of Science on Society. Psychology, physiology, forged fields of science, scientific techniques, which still awaited development. Two great men, Pavlov and Freud, laid a foundation after much work with them. Yeah, because they had different ideas, but they were trained to do something else. Because actually Freud seemed like a good guy at first, and then everything changed. And these two men started to study how to subvert us, how to make us into the monsters, how to make men hate women, women hate men, children hate everybody. So, he said that he does not accept the view that they are in any essential conflict, but what the structure that will be built on their foundations is still in doubt. I think the subject which will be most important politically is mass psychology. Its importance has been enormous and been increased by the growth of modern methods of propaganda. Of these, the most influential is what is called education. Religion, of course, plays a part, though a diminishing one. The press, the cinema, the radio play an increasing part. Because they knew they were going to move from religion to television to movies. They knew this. That movies would take over. Anyway, it may be hoped that in time anybody would be able to persuade anyone of anything if he could catch the patient young and provided the state with enough money and enough equipment. Russell continued, the subject will be able to make great strides when it is taken up by scientists under scientific dictatorship. The social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing unshakable conviction that the snow is black. Various results will be arrived at. First, the influence of the home is obstructive. Second, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Third, that verses set to music, repeatedly intoned, will be very, very effective. Fourth, that the operation or the opinion that snow is white must be held to show a morbid taste for strangeness. But I anticipate it is the future scientists to make these maximums precise discovered exactly how much it costs, per head of course, to make children believe that the snow is black, and that how much less it would cost to make them believe it is dark gray. We need to know the exact numbers. Russell concluded with a warning: though scientists will be greatly and diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The populace will never be allowed to know its convictions were generated. The populace will never be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. The technique has to be perfected. Every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. They're working towards it. They're working towards it right now. In his blueprint of scientific dictatorship was matched by the account of Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, which we have spoken of, in a speech on the U.S. State Department's Voice of America, 1961, A World of Pharmacology and the Manipulated Slaves, living in a concentration camp of the mind, enhanced by propaganda, psychotropic drugs, learning to love their servitude, abandoning all will to resist. This, Huxley concluded, is the final revolution, which we are a part of. His words. In 61. So it had already started. Another one saying it had already started. Now, speaking at a California medical school, San Francisco, Huxley announced, there will be in the next generation a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude, producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will, in fact, have their liberties taken away from them, but rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmaceuticals. This seems to be the final revolution. With this context in mind, we begin to see the reason that all modern West, all this world, is unable to combat this strategic infiltration and destruction due to its adoption of the same ideas of enlightenment and the Jacobites of all of these revolutionaries, of course. Now, as long as you have conflicting presuppositions, ideas, and doublethink at work in your worldview, it is only a matter of time before one begins to live more constantly with one of the two combining principles. In philosophy, they call this the coming before one begins to live. more consistently with the one of two combating principles. In philosophy, we call this subconsciousness. America, leading the world as a proposed subtraction nation, founded on doublethink, dualistic rationalism, puritanical puritanism. It is the Enlightenment par excellence, and only works so far as the assumptions of enlightenment are correct. It's my job to tell you the truth and the ugly red pill truth. Set these ideas of enlightenment and this anthology and much of the cults that you have learned to love are wrong. Man is not a blank slate, and the slate is not an entity that social contract speaks into existence. They cannot abracadabra us out of existence if we decide. They can't. We need to fight back. How? Find out what you need to do and be willing to die for it. I mean it. Be willing to die for it. I don't mean go out in the streets, that's what they want. I mean find what you need to do, give everything you have to do that one thing. The entire history of statecraft and humanity attests to the opposite of what they've told us is enlightenment. Certainly didn't dissuade Locke or Rizzo or Jefferson from their deep commitments to these dogmas. The fire in the mind of man was lit, and rather than produce a utopia, it resulted in a rise of brutal regimes controlled by the money power in a way this world has never seen. And to be the bearer of further bad news, this bogus religious system of holy enlightenment is so entrenched still that the only outcome for the modern seems to be the rise of the great beast, the state, and the hordes of bureaucrats, and the NGO workers, and the policy makers, the officials, and their other compartmentalized know-nothings who do daily labor to erect this Babel. The coming world state is the great version of the New Jerusalem, the dark lords and the technocrats above them. It is a known trap, the ultimate con for the humanity in general, lulling them into a sweet submission to the Pied Piper's tunes. All through science. I've seen people triggered. We're watching this all over the United States, Canada, the world, triggered. People are being turned on and turned off. And it's not only to say that religion and ancient man in general were not slaves to superstition, or that the rise of science somehow is somehow false or dangerous by itself. The scientific method is a tool, like human reason, that is able to be used for all matter of good. However, when it is inverted, like our alphabet, and given an undue place, as in this post-enlightenment era, it becomes the instrument of doom, as we have seen through Russell and Huxley. The false faith in man's reason and scientific method must be accompanied the false face of man and his own progress. We have a heart. It is our emotions that really make us different. It is our compassion and our love and our joy. These things are used, of course, right? Of course. But they want to turn our passion into just lust. Our lust into hate, if they can. Our love into hate. And I'm seeing it triggered over and over and over again. There are rooms I can barely go into now, chat rooms. Because you can see it. You can see people buying into the crap. I want my brothers and sisters to survive this. And I do think the next test run is important. And yeah, I want you to be afraid. Get up and fight. Not on the streets, but for yourself. I'm better because I chose to be. I read things. I studied things. I built things. If I can do it, you can do it. Fight back. Fight back. Find a way. Not by getting angry, not by saying bad words, which I know I do. Modern man. We are being shown as on a mad quest to grab, once again, the destructive fire of the sun and the atom and the great electromagnetic engine, and instead, yet unable to control his horse's passion, ends up destroying everything that he's thought to conquer. Even Oppenheimer stated this when he spoke of splitting the atom, calling himself Shiva, the destroyer of worlds. The classics are such a lesson of warning against hubris. But like a toddler with a revolver, man's indigestion of a near infinite data stream of knowledge, coupled with his lack of wisdom, can only end in desolation and destruction. And this Satan great con, Faustian bargain, technology, an obsession without wisdom. If there's a Satan, it is not a being, it is that. And even if you look into the words of what Satan means, you will find a great power there that you could use instead of this. If there is no God, what is the point of existence? Anyway, see you Thursday. There will be more.